I stood in the doorway of the master bedroom, snow melting off my coat, watching my wife of 40 years drag herself across the carpet, with cracked, bleeding lips, trying to lick the condensation off the cold window pane. Because her wheelchair had been pushed out of reach, and her water bottle was dry and covered in green mold just 10 feet away down the hall. The bass from the stereo was shaking the pictures on the walls, and my son was opening a bottle of champagne, celebrating my money, while his mother died of thirst in the dark. I'm Conrad Sterling, 67 years old, and that night I realized the boy I raised had become a monster, before I tell you how I made him regret the day he was born. Let me know where you are watching from. In the comments below, hit like and subscribe. If you have ever had to protect the ones you love from the people who should have loved them the most. The blizzard at O'Hare International Airport was not just a weather event. It was a wall of white ice that grounded. Every flight out of Chicago, including my connection to Florida, I had been gone for 3 days on a mandatory trip to settle some old administrative paperwork for my retirement. Or at least that is what I told my son Tyler. The truth was, I was meeting with my estate planners to ensure my family would be taken care of for generations. But standing there at the airline counter, watching the canceled status blink in red neon, I felt a cold knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach that had nothing to do with the temperature. I decided not to call Tyler or his girlfriend Vanessa to tell them I was coming back early. I wanted to surprise them. I wanted to bring home the expensive chocolates I had bought at the duty-free shop and see Beatrice smile when I walked through the door a day early. Beatrice, my beautiful wife who had suffered a mild stroke 2 years ago and needed help with basic things like walking and cooking. I hated leaving her even for a few days, but Tyler had promised, he swore to me with tears in his eyes, that he would take care of his mother like she was a queen, he said. Go, Dad, you deserve a break. We got this. I rented a car because no taxis were running in that storm, and drove 4 hours through blinding snow the entire way. I had this gnawing feeling, a primitive instinct that screamed something was wrong. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, telling myself I was just being a paranoid old man. Tyler was 32 years old. He was my son. He had made mistakes. Sure, he had some debts, and he had lost his job again. But he would never neglect his mother. When I finally turned onto my street at 2 in the morning, the suburban silence I expected was shattered. My quiet cul-de-sac looked like a parking lot for a downtown nightclub. Luxury cars I did not recognize were parked on my lawn, crushing the winter grass. My driveway was blocked by a massive black SUV. Music was not just playing, it was pulsating, vibrating the very foundations of the house I had paid off. With 40 years of sweat and labor, the windows were flashing with strobe lights. I parked the rental car down the street and walked through the snow, the wind cutting through my coat, but the heat of my rage kept me warm. I walked up the driveway, stepping over empty beer bottles and cigarette butts tossed into the snow where Beatrice used to plant her tulips. I put my key in the front door, but it was unlocked. I pushed it open, and the smell hit me first, a sickening mix of stale beer, sweat, and the pungent skunk-like odor of high-grade marijuana. My living room was unrecognizable. Strangers were everywhere, people half my age dancing on my furniture, spilling drinks on the carpet, passing joints around like it was a fraternity party. No one even looked at me, and I was just an old man in a winter coat, a ghost in my own home. I pushed through the crowd, my heart hammering against my ribs, not with fear, but with a singular, terrifying focus. Where was Beatrice? I shoved a young man out of my way when he tried to offer me a drink, and I ran toward the hallway leading to the master bedroom. The door was closed. I tried the handle. Locked. Why was the door to my own bedroom locked inside my own house? I pounded on it, screaming her name, but the bass was too loud. The music drowned out my voice. I stepped back and kicked the door right near the lock once, twice on the third kick. The wood splintered, and the door flew open. The silence in the room was a violent contrast to the chaos in the hall. The only light came from the street lamps outside, filtering through the sheer curtains, and that is when I saw her, Beatrice, my wife. The woman who had stood by me when we had nothing, was on the floor. She was wearing her nightgown, which was stained and soiled. She had fallen or dragged herself out of bed and was lying near the window, her frail hand pressing against the glass. "Beatrice," I choked out, rushing to her side. When I turned her over, I gasped. Her lips were not just dry, they were cracked and bleeding fissures of red against pale skin. Her eyes were sunken, surrounded by dark, bruised circles. She looked at me, but her gaze was unfocused, hazy with dehydration. She tried to speak, but only a dry, raspy wheeze came out of her throat. She pointed a shaking finger toward the window pane, where droplets of condensation had formed from the difference in temperature. She had been trying to lick the glass to get moisture. I looked around the room in a panic, searching for her water pitcher. It was on the nightstand, but it was bone dry, and when I looked closer, I saw fuzzy green mold growing at the bottom. That pitcher had not been washed or refilled in days. Days. My wife had been without water for days while I was gone, thinking she was safe. I ran to the adjoining bathroom and filled a glass with tap water. My hands shaking so bad I spilled half of it on my coat. I rushed back and lifted her head, cradling her like a baby. Slowly, I let a few drops fall onto her lips. She groaned, a sound of pure agony and desperate relief, and tried to gulp it, but I pulled it back, knowing if she drank too fast, she would vomit. "Slow, my love, slow." I whispered, tears freezing on my cheeks. She drank 3 glasses slowly, the life flickering back into her eyes, but the terror remained. She gripped my coat with a strength I did not know she had, and buried her face in my chest, sobbing, dry, tearless sobs because her body had no moisture left. To make tears, I held her, rocking her back and forth amidst the thumping bass from the living room. Feeling a hatred so pure and so cold, it frightened me. Suddenly the bedroom door slammed against the wall, hitting the plaster with a crack. Tyler stumbled in holding a bottle of vodka, his shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest. Vanessa, his girlfriend, followed him, stumbling in high heels holding a plastic red cup. They were both laughing until they saw me kneeling on the floor holding Beatrice. Dad, Tyler slurred, blinking his eyes as if trying to focus. "What the hell are you doing here? You are supposed to be in Florida. You ruined the vibe, man. Seriously." He did not ask about his mother on the floor. He did not ask why the door was broken. He asked why I was interrupting his party. Vanessa leaned against the doorframe. Rolling her eyes, she looked at Beatrice with a mix of disgust and boredom. "Oh God, is she acting out again?" Vanessa said, her voice dripping with venom. "She is such a drama queen, Conrad. She drank water this afternoon. I gave it to her myself. She is just doing this for attention because you are home. Lies. Blatant, filthy lies." I looked at the mold in the pitcher. I looked at my wife's cracked, bleeding lips. I looked at the soil stains on her nightgown, proving she had not been helped to the bathroom, in who knows how long. "You gave her water," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Really, Vanessa?" "Then why is there mold in her pitcher? Why is she drinking from the window?" Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. "Please, she probably spilled it. She is clumsy. You know how she gets. She is losing it, totally senile." Tyler stepped forward, swaying. "Look, Dad, do not make a scene." "Okay, we were just blowing off some steam. Taking care of her is hard work. We deserve a break. Just put her back in bed and come have a drink. Stop being so uptight. Put her back in bed like she was a piece of luggage, like she was a toy they were done playing with." I gently laid Beatrice back against the pillows, covering her with the quilt. She was still shaking, gripping my hand so hard her knuckles were white. "Get out," I said. I did not shout. I did not scream. I spoke with the calm of a man who has already decided the outcome of a war. "Get everyone out of my house now, Tyler." Tyler laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Come on, Dad. These are my friends. You cannot just kick them out. It is snowing." I stood up slowly, my knees cracking. I walked up to my son, and for the first time in his life he took a step back because he saw something in my eyes he had never seen before. He saw the man who had survived poverty, who had built a life from nothing. He saw the man who was no longer his father, but his adversary, I said. Get them out, or I call the police and I report a break-in, and 50 counts of trespassing. Vanessa grabbed Tyler's arm. He is serious, babe, the old man is losing it. Let us just go to the hotel. Tyler glared at me, his jaw tight. Fine. You want to be a miserable old prick, be one, but do not expect us to help you clean up this mess. Come on, Ness. They turned and stumbled out, leaving the door hanging off its hinges. I heard Tyler yelling at the crowd, shutting down the music. The sound of complaints and cursing filled the house, but slowly the vibrations stopped. The cars started up and the house fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. I locked the front door, engaging the deadbolt and the security chain. I went back to the bedroom and sat in the chair beside Beatrice, watching her sleep, watching her chest rise and fall, ensuring she was still breathing. I reached for my phone, my thumb hovering over the emergency number for the police. I was going to report them. I was going to have them arrested for elder abuse, for neglect, for everything. But then Beatrice stirred. She opened her eyes and looked at me with an intensity that stopped me cold. She lifted her hand and pointed not at me but at the small side table where Tyler had left his phone in his drunken haste to leave the room. I looked at the phone. The screen was lit up with a notification. A text message had just come in. I picked it up, feeling like I was violating a boundary, but after what I had just seen, boundaries no longer existed. The message was from a contact saved simply as The Shark. It read, "You have 1 week, Tyler. 50,000, or we break your legs and then we pay a visit to your rich daddy and his sick wife. We know where they live. Do not test us." I stared at the screen, the words burning into my retinas. $50,000, rich daddy, sick wife. This was not just a party. This was not just neglect. This was a setup. Tyler was not just a disappointed son. He was in deep, dangerous trouble, and he was using us as collateral. I looked at Beatrice and she nodded weakly. She knew she had heard things. I realized then that while she lay there dehydrated and helpless, she had been listening. They had been talking in front of her, thinking she was too out of it to understand, or too weak to do anything about it. If I called the police now, they would arrest Tyler for neglect maybe, but he would be out on bail in 24 hours, and then he would be desperate. And those people, the ones threatening to break his legs, they would come for us. They knew where we lived. Calling the police was the emotional move. It was the move of a hurt father, but I needed to be the general. I needed to be the man who built an empire in the shadows. I needed to destroy the threat completely, and to do that, I needed to know the full extent of the rot. I put the phone back exactly where it was. I sat back down and took Beatrice's hand. I looked into her eyes and made a silent vow I was not going to kick them out, not yet. I was going to keep them close. I was going to play the frail, oblivious old man. I was going to let them think they were winning. Because if they thought they were winning, they would get careless. They would reveal everything, their plans, their debts, their crimes, and when I had enough evidence to bury them so deep, they would never see the sun again. That is when I would strike. The next morning, the sun glared off the snow, blindingly bright. I was in the kitchen making oatmeal for Beatrice when Tyler and Vanessa walked in. They looked hungover, wearing sunglasses inside, shielding their eyes from the light. The kitchen was a disaster, sticky floors, overflowing trash cans, the smell of stale beer still lingering. Tyler cleared his throat, leaning against the counter, holding a cup of coffee. "Dad, about last night," he started, his voice rough. "I know it looked bad, but you have to understand." I turned around, moving slowly, stooping my shoulders. Little more than necessary, making my hands tremble just a bit as I stirred the pot. I looked at him with wide, watery eyes. "I understand, son," I said, my voice wavering. "I was just so scared for your mother. The storm, the flight. I was not myself. I overreacted." Tyler and Vanessa exchanged a quick glance, a look of surprise, and then immediate relief. They had expected a fight. They had expected an eviction. Instead, they found a confused, scared old man. "Yeah, you really did," Vanessa said, taking a bite of an apple she grabbed from the bowl. "You really scared us," Conrad screaming like that. I am sorry, I said, lowering my head. I just love her so much, and seeing her like that. Tyler stepped forward, putting a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy, fake exactly. Dad, we love her too, that is why we threw the party. I looked up, blinking. What do you mean? It was a fundraiser, Tyler lied smoothly without missing a beat. We were raising money for Mom's treatments for that specialist in Switzerland we talked about, remember? We raised almost $2,000 cash last night before you kicked everyone out. A fundraiser for a specialist, we had never discussed $2,000 cash that was definitely going straight into his pocket. Or to the loan shark. It was such a bold, disgusting lie that I almost laughed. Oh, Tyler, I said, letting a tear fall. I had no idea. I am so sorry, I ruined it. It is okay, Dad, Tyler said, smiling. That shark smile, we can fix it, but we need to talk about Mom's care. Obviously, us being here is not enough. She needs more. She needs professional help, and that costs money. Here it comes, the pitch, Vanessa chimed in. Actually, Conrad, we were thinking, maybe it is time to look at assisted living facilities. There is this great one nearby. Green Acres? It is very affordable and they have great staff. Green Acres, I knew that place. It was a warehouse for the dying, a place where the state sent people who had no one else. It was a hellhole disguised as a care facility. And to pay for it, Tyler continued, we might need to look at the equity in this house, maybe take out a loan, or sell it and downsize. Sell the house, put Beatrice in a state-run facility, and take the equity. I nodded slowly, pretending to think about it. You might be right. Son, I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel. I am getting too old to manage. All this money is so confusing these days. Maybe I should let you help me more, Tyler. Eyes lit up like a predator seeing a wounded deer, really. Dad, yes, I said. I think I need to rest today, but maybe tomorrow we can talk about signing some papers, maybe a power of attorney, so you can handle the bills for your mother. Vanessa squealed and hugged me. Oh, Conrad, that is the smartest decision you have ever made. We will take such good care of everything. I hugged her back, feeling her cold ambition radiating off her skin. Yes, I whispered, I am sure you will. I went back to the bedroom to feed Beatrice her oatmeal. She looked at me worried, but I winked at her just once, a signal that the game was on. I pulled out my burner phone, the one I kept for emergencies, and I sent a text to Ms. Montgomery, my attorney. It read, freeze the trust fund, stop the allowance, prepare the surveillance team. I am activating the scorched earth protocol. Then I sat by the window watching Tyler and Vanessa in the driveway high-five each other. They thought they had won the lottery. They thought they had manipulated a helpless old man. They had no idea that inside this house they were now trapped with a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. My flight was canceled, but their free ride was over. The party was just getting started. But this time I would be the one choosing the music. The morning light was unforgiving. It exposed the sticky residue on the hardwood floors and the scratches on the mahogany table that Tyler was frantically trying to cover with a cheap placemat. The smell of lemon chemical cleaner hung heavy in the air, battling the underlying stench of stale beer and regret. But my son was not cleaning for hygiene. He was cleaning for the performance. Tyler stood by the kitchen island, sweating, despite the cold draft coming from the broken bedroom door. Look, Dad, he said, gesturing to a mason jar stuffed with crumpled $10 and $20 bills. Look at this, we counted it again. It is almost $2,000 exactly. People really care about Mom. I stared at the jar. It was a pathetic prop. The bills were crisp. Too crisp, like they had just come out of an ATM, probably withdrawn from the very credit cards he had stolen from my wallet while I slept. But I widened my eyes, my hands trembling as I reached out to touch the glass. Oh, Tyler, I breathed out, letting my voice crack perfectly. I had no idea. I thought you were just having a party. I feel so terrible for yelling. Tyler exchanged a smug look with Vanessa, who was leaning against the sink, scrolling on her phone. She immediately straightened up, putting on her mask of the concerned daughter-in-law. It is okay, Conrad, she said. her voice dripping with artificial sweetener. We know you are under a lot of stress. Traveling at your age is hard. It confuses the mind. They were already planting the seeds of my incompetence. I nodded slowly, shuffling my feet in my slippers. Yes, it is very confusing, I muttered. I just worry about the money. My pension is not what it used to be, and with the inflation. Tyler's eyes sharpened like a shark. Smelling blood in the water. Exactly. That is why we are stepping up. We do not want you to worry about a thing. We know you have been struggling to manage the bills lately. We saw the late notices. There were no late notices, and I paid everything automatically online, but they did not know that because they thought I was a dinosaur who still wrote checks. I am just so tired, I whispered, leaning heavily on the counter. Maybe you are right. Maybe I am losing my grip on things. Take a break, Dad, Tyler said, guiding me toward the living room chair. Sit down. Vanessa is making a special smoothie for Mom, lots of vitamins. I sat down watching them from the corner of my eye while they high-fived silently behind the refrigerator door. They thought I was broken. They thought I was senile. But while my body slumped in that chair, my mind was racing across the Atlantic Ocean to a server in Zurich. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, locking the door and turning on the faucet to mask any sound. I pulled out my burner phone again and dialed a number that bypassed the reception desk and went straight to the personal line of Ms. Montgomery, the most ruthless asset protection lawyer in Chicago. Conrad, she answered on the first ring, her voice sharp as a razor. I received your text. Are we initiating the freeze immediately? I whispered into the phone. But listen closely. Eleanor, this is critical. Tyler thinks he works for a logistics consulting firm in Detroit. He thinks his $5,000 monthly salary comes from a client I know. Conrad, she interrupted. I set up that shell company myself 10 years ago to give him a sense of purpose. Kill it, I said. Cut the contract. Fire him effective immediately. Tell the payroll department to issue a notice of termination due to budget cuts sent to his email. In 1 hour there was a pause on the line, a silence that acknowledged the severity of what I was doing. I was not just cutting him off, and I was destroying his identity, his fantasy of being a self-made man. Consider it done, she said, and the accounts. Lock them, I commanded. Move the liquid assets to the holding company in the Caymans. Leave only the joint checking account. I share with Beatrice, the one with the pension deposit. Leave enough for groceries, but not enough for a lawyer. Understood, Conrad, stay safe. I hung up and flushed the toilet for effect when I looked in the mirror. I did not see a victim. I saw a CEO executing a hostile takeover of his own life. I washed my face, letting the cold water shock my system back into character. When I walked back into the kitchen, Tyler was checking his phone, frowning slightly. He had probably just tried to buy something online and been declined. Or maybe he was checking his bank balance, waiting for that paycheck that would never come. Everything okay, son? I asked, my voice trembling. Just the right amount. Yeah, Dad. Just work stuff, Tyler muttered, pocketing his phone. Big clients, you know, always demanding. I smiled a sad, senile smile. Oh, I know, son. You are such a hard worker, just like I used to be. Vanessa walked past us carrying a tray with a glass of green sludge. Here is breakfast for the Queen, she announced. I followed her into the bedroom, my heart hardening into stone as I watched her feed my wife spoonfuls of what looked like blended kale and tap water while they planned to feast on my carcass. They did not know that the feast was already over and the famine was about to begin. The kitchen table felt like an interrogation room, the air thick with unsaid threats and the smell of desperation coming off my son in waves. Tyler sat across from me, tapping a pen against a thick stack of documents. His leg bouncing nervously under the table, he looked like a man running out of time because he was, though. He did not know I was the one holding the stopwatch. Dad, he started pushing the papers toward me. We need to be practical. Mom is getting worse and you are not getting any younger managing the finances. The medical bills, the insurance, It is too much for you, look at you. Your hands are shaking. I let my hands tremble a little more on purpose, gripping my coffee mug with both hands, as if it were the only thing anchoring me to the earth. It is just so much paper, Tyler, I murmured, squinting at the dense legal text through my reading glasses. I do not understand half of these words. What is a durable power of attorney? Tyler sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience designed to make me feel small and stupid. It just means I can help you, Dad. It means when the insurance company calls, I can talk to them instead of you having to wait on hold for hours. It means I can pay the electric bill. If you forget, it is just a safety net, he called it. But I knew exactly what a durable power of attorney was. I had used them in my business dealings for 30 years. In the wrong hands, it was not a safety net. It was a weapon. It would give him the legal right to empty my bank accounts, sell my stocks, and sign the deed to this house over to himself or his creditors. Without me ever knowing until the sheriff came to evict us. He was asking me to sign my own death warrant. I do not know, son, I said, my voice wavering. I have always handled the bills. Your mother and I, we have a system. Your system is broken, Conrad. Vanessa interrupted, sliding into the chair next to me. She placed a glossy trifold brochure on top of the legal papers covering the clauses about asset liquidation. Look, we found the perfect solution for Beatrice. I looked down at the brochure. The front cover featured a smiling, silver-haired couple clinking champagne glasses on the balcony overlooking a garden. The text in bold gold letters read, "The Serenity Gardens, Luxury Senior Living." It looks expensive, I whispered, touching the glossy paper. It is very exclusive, Vanessa lied, her eyes shining with that predatory gleam, but we pulled some strings. Tyler knows a guy on the board. They are willing to give us a family discount. It is basically a 5-star resort, Conrad. They have spa days, gourmet chefs round the clock, concierge. It is better than a hotel. I picked up the brochure, bringing it closer to my face, pretending to admire the photos. But I was looking at the fine print on the back, specifically the address, 149 Industrial Parkway. I knew that address. It was not a resort. It was a converted warehouse in the worst part of town, sandwiched between a chemical plant and a scrapyard. I had driven past it 100 times, inspecting shipments for my logistics company. It was a place where people were sent to rot. The state had investigated it twice for neglect. Bedbugs, malnutrition, and unexplainable patient injuries. This is where they wanted to send my wife, my Beatrice, to a place where the air smelled of sulfur and the food came out of a can, while they lived in my house and spent my money. It says here they have a heated pool, I read out loud, inventing a detail to test them. Yes, exactly, Vanessa said quickly, jumping on the lie. A beautiful heated pool, she will love it. She can do water aerobics. There was no pool at Serenity Gardens unless you counted the puddles in the leaking basement. It sounds wonderful, I said, letting a note of longing creep into my voice, but how can we afford it if it is so luxurious? That is where the power of attorney comes in, Dad. Tyler pressed, tapping the pen against the signature line again. If you sign this, I can restructure some of the investments. Maybe take a small equity line on the house to cover the entrance fee. It is an investment in Mama's health. Do you not want her to have the best? He was using my love for her as leverage, twisting the knife. He knew I would do anything for her, and he was banking on that blindness. I looked at the pen, then at my son. His face, sweat was beading on his forehead, despite the cool room. His eyes were darting to his phone, checking the time, checking for messages from the loan shark, threatening his kneecaps. He was terrified, and a terrified man makes mistakes. I reached out and took the pen. Tyler held his breath, his entire body tensed, ready for the victory. I brought the tip of the pen down to the paper, hovering over the line where my name would sign away my life, and then I stopped. My hand shook violently, and I dropped the pen. It clattered onto the table and rolled onto the floor. "Oh, damn it," I muttered, rubbing my temples. "I am sorry, son. I feel so dizzy. All of a sudden, my head is spinning. Tyler's face fell from triumph to fury. In a split second, Dad, just pick it up and sign it. It takes 2 seconds. I cannot think straight, I whined, leaning back and closing my eyes. It is the stress, the lack of sleep. I need to lie down. I need to think about this. It is a big decision. Selling the house, moving your mother. We are not selling the house today, Dad. Vanessa snapped, her patience snapping. Just sign the paper so we can help you. I cannot sign anything without reading it first, I said, putting on my stubborn old man voice, the one that used to drive Tyler crazy when he was a teenager. I promised your mother I would never sign anything without praying on it first. Leave the papers here. I will look at them after I nap. I stood up, using the table for leverage, moving painfully slow. Tyler looked like he wanted to scream. He looked like he wanted to grab my hand and force the pen into it, but he knew he could not yet, not without leaving marks. Fine, he spat, grabbing the brochure but leaving the legal documents. Take a nap, but we need to do this by tonight, Dad. The special offer at the nursing home expires tomorrow. We cannot wait. I understand, son, said, shuffling toward the bedroom. I just need a clear head. As I closed the bedroom door behind me, I heard Vanessa hiss at him. What are we going to do, Tyler? The deadline is in 48 hours. If we do not get that money, shut up, Vanessa, Tyler growled. I will handle it if he does not sign it tonight. We will just have to make sure he cannot say no tomorrow. I locked the bedroom door and moved the dresser in front of it, just an inch enough to make noise if they tried to enter. I went to Beatrice, who was sitting up in bed, looking at me with terrified eyes. It is okay, my love, I whispered, kissing her forehead. They think they are hunting a lamb, but they just walked into the lioness den. I picked up the brochure they had left behind and looked at the stock photo of the happy couple again. I tore it in half, slowly, deliberately. Tonight. I would not sleep tonight. I would become the nightmare they deserved. The freezing air bit at my cheeks as I stepped out of the house, clutching the prescription bottle like a lifeline. I told Tyler I was going to the pharmacy for Beatrice's blood pressure medication, which was true, but it was also the only excuse that would get me out of that suffocating house without him insisting on tagging along to watch my every move. He was pacing the living room. When I left, chewing his fingernails down to the quick, his eyes darting to the window. Every time a car passed, he was a man living on borrowed time, and his panic was filling my home like a gas leak. I drove the rental car to the CVS on the edge of town, but I did not park in the front. I drove around to the loading dock, where the shadows were long and the security cameras had blind spots. A nondescript gray sedan was already there, waiting with the engine running. I parked and slipped into the passenger seat of the gray car. The heater was blasting, and the air smelled of stale coffee and cheap tobacco. Mr. Blackwood sat behind the wheel, looking like a man who had seen the bottom of humanity and decided to stay there. He was the best private investigator my firm had used for corporate espionage back in the day, and he was the only man I trusted to dig through my own son's garbage. He did not say hello, he just handed me a thick manila envelope. The weight of it felt heavy in my hands, like a brick or a weapon. It is worse than we thought, Conrad Blackwood said, his voice gravelly and low. He did not look at me. He kept his eyes on the rearview mirror, scanning for threats. Your boy is not just broke, he is underwater. He is drowning, and he has tied an anchor to your ankle. I opened the envelope, my hands shaking slightly, not from age but from the rage simmering in my blood. The first photo was grainy, taken with a long lens, showing Tyler shaking hands with a man who looked like he broke bones for a living. They were standing outside a shady payday loan office in the bad part of the city. Who is that? I asked, pointing to the thug. That is Vinny. The butcher, Blackwood replied, but he is just the muscle, though. Money comes from an underground syndicate running out of Atlantic City. Tyler got into crypto gambling. Conrad, he started small, losing a few grand here and there. But then he got desperate. He thought he could win it back. If he just had more leverage, he started trading on margin, betting on coins that did not exist. I flipped the page and saw a document that made my breath catch in my throat. It was a deed of trust, a mortgage document for my house, the house I had paid off 15 years ago, the house where I raised him. He forged your signature, Blackwood said, pointing to the scrawl at the bottom of the page. It is a good forgery, too. He must have practiced. He used the house as collateral for a hard money loan from the syndicate. $200,000 at 50% interest, compounding weekly, my vision blurred. $200,000. He had gambled away my home, my security, my wife's sanctuary on digital coins and lost it all. He lost every penny in 48 hours. Blackwood continued, his voice devoid of pity. Just facts. The loan is due in full next Friday. Conrad, that is the deadline, 7 days. If he does not pay the principal plus interest by next Friday, the syndicate takes the house. But they do not do foreclosure proceedings. They do evictions with baseball bats and gasoline. That is why he is pushing for the power of attorney. He needs legal control to sell the house to a cash buyer before the shark comes to collect. 7 days, that explained the party. It was not a celebration, it was a frantic attempt to show liquidity to his creditors. That explained the rush to put Beatrice in a home he needed, the house empty to sell it fast and cheap. He was going to sell my life's work for pennies on the dollar, just to save his own skin. And the girl, I asked, flipping to the next section of the file. Vanessa. Blackwood let out a dry, humorless laugh. Vanessa, her name is not. Vanessa, it is Veronica Miller, and she is a professional, Conrad. She has a rap sheet in 3 states: fraud, identity theft, and 2 counts of elder abuse that were dropped due to lack of evidence. She targets widowers or men with senile parents. She worms her way in, gets access to the accounts, drains them dry, and vanishes before the family realizes what happened. I looked at her mugshot. She looked younger, harder without the makeup she wore in my kitchen. She met Tyler at a casino. Blackwood explained she saw a desperate Mark with a rich father. She is not just his girlfriend, Conrad. She is the architect. She is the one who told him about the hard money lenders. She is the one coaching him on how to manipulate you. She is banking on you being too old and too weak to fight back. She thinks you are an easy payday. I closed the folder, the paper edges sharp against my fingers. They thought I was a senile old man, a helpless victim. They had no idea that the man they were trying to rob had negotiated contracts with union bosses and dismantled hostile takeovers before breakfast. Does he know, I asked, looking at Blackwood. Does he know about the logistics company? Does he know about the real accounts? Blackwood shook his head, no. He thinks you are living on a pension and Social Security. He has no idea. You are the majority shareholder of Sterling Logistics. If he knew, he would not be trying to sell the house for peanuts. He would be trying to enable you to inherit the empire. I stared out the windshield at the brick wall of the pharmacy. Anger was a cold, hard knot in my chest, but underneath it was a profound sadness. My son was gone. The boy I taught to ride a bike was dead, replaced by this desperate, greedy stranger. Keep digging, I said, my voice steady. I want everything. I want the text messages between him and the shark. I want the transaction records of the forgery. I want proof that Vanessa is coordinating this. I want a paper trail so thick it will bury them for 20 years. Blackwood nodded, taking the folder back. Are you sure you want to go back there, Conrad? These people are dangerous if Tyler gets desperate enough. I am going back. I interrupted, opening the car door. I have to protect Beatrice, and I have to give them enough rope to hang themselves. If I confront them, now they will run, or they will play the victim. I need to catch them in the act. I need the world to see them for what they are. I got out of the car, the cold wind biting my face again. I walked into the pharmacy and bought the heart medication, paying with cash. I bought a bottle of vitamins too, just for show. When I drove back to the house, I was no longer just a father trying to save his son. I was a CEO conducting a liquidation. I was going to dismantle their lives piece by piece, and I was going to enjoy it. I pulled into the driveway, and saw Tyler watching me from the window, his face pale and anxious. He was counting down the hours until his deadline. Little did he know I was the one holding the clock. The next 72 hours were not just a waiting game. They were a masterclass in psychological warfare, designed to break the spirit of two people who my son and his girlfriend, considered already dead, living in that house, was like being trapped in a cage with two well-fed hyenas who were just waiting for the right moment to snap your neck. They did not need to use physical violence because they had discovered something far more effective. They used food as a weapon and humiliation as a sport. The smell hit me first. It was the rich, intoxicating aroma of rosemary, garlic, and searing beef fat, wafting from the kitchen where Vanessa was cooking. It was a scent that should have signaled a family celebration, but instead, it signaled our torture. I walked into the dining room, my stomach growling, a traitorous reminder that I had barely eaten since I returned. Vanessa was placing a platter on the table, and on it rested two thick, marbled Wagyu steaks seared to perfection, glistening with butter. Tyler was already seated, a napkin tucked into his shirt, holding his knife and fork, like a toddler waiting for dessert. He looked up at me, his eyes glassy with wine, and gestured to the empty chairs at the far end of the table. "Sit down, Dad." Ness made dinner. I shuffled to the table, helping Beatrice maneuver her wheelchair. She looked frail, her skin paper-thin, and her eyes were fixed on the steak with a hunger that broke my heart. I sat her down and then took my seat, expecting perhaps a smaller portion or a cheaper cut. But Vanessa walked over to us, carrying a small plastic bowl. "Here you go, Beatrice," she said, her voice sticky sweet like molasses. "We have to be careful with your digestion. You know, rich food is bad for your heart." She placed the bowl in front of my wife. It was not soup, it was gray, lukewarm water with a few floating pieces of translucent onion and a single soggy carrot slice. It looked like dishwater. It smelled like nothing. It was a meal for a prisoner in a dungeon, not a woman in her own home. "And for you, Conrad," she said, sliding a plate of dry, unbuttered toast and a small scoop of cottage cheese toward me. "We are watching your cholesterol. Remember, doctor said light meals only." I looked at the feast in front of them, the steak, the roasted potatoes, the bottle of red wine that I knew cost $200 because I had bought it for my anniversary 5 years ago, and then I looked at the slop in front of my wife. "Is there any broth left?" I asked, my voice trembling with a rage I barely managed to disguise. "This looks very thin, Vanessa." Vanessa let out a dramatic sigh, putting a hand on her hip. "Honestly, Conrad, you are so ungrateful. I spent hours making this vegetable stock from scratch. It is full of nutrients. Chewing is hard for her. We do not want her to choke, do we?" Tyler cut into his steak, the pink juice running onto the china plate. He did not even look at his mother. He just shoved a massive piece of meat into his mouth, chewing loudly, moaning with pleasure. "Babe, this is incredible," he said, with his mouth full, seriously. "You outdid yourself." I watched him eat. My son, the boy, had taught to fish. The boy I had carried on my shoulders was sitting there gorging himself on luxury, while his mother stared at a bowl of gray water, and he did not care. He did not offer her a bite. He did not ask if she wanted something else. He just ate and drank and laughed at something Vanessa whispered in his ear. I picked up the spoon and began to feed Beatrice. She opened her mouth obediently, but I saw the humiliation in her eyes. She was a proud woman, and having to eat this garbage while her daughter-in-law smirked at her was killing her faster than any disease. Every meal for 3 days was a variation of this torment. For breakfast, they had eggs, Benedict, and fresh squeezed orange juice, while we had watery oatmeal. With no sugar for lunch, they ordered sushi platters that filled the kitchen with the smell of fresh fish, while we were given half a sandwich each, with stale bread and a single slice of bologna. They were starving us. They were weakening us physically and breaking us, mentally trying to prove that we were helpless, that we were dependent, that we were nothing but burdens taking up space in their house. But they made a fatal mistake. They assumed I was following their rules. They assumed I was the frail old man who went to bed at 8 o'clock and slept through the night. They did not know that hunger keeps you awake and hatred gives you energy. At 2 in the morning, when the house was finally silent, and the only sound was Tyler's drunken snoring, echoing from the guest room, I became a ghost. I slipped out of bed. My movements silent, practiced over a lifetime of working in warehouses, where noise discipline was safety. I crept into the kitchen, avoiding every creaky floorboard. I opened the pantry door, slowly, holding the latch so it would not click behind the rows of stale cereal and expired canned goods. I had created a hidden stockpile on the first day. Back I had smuggled in high-calorie protein bars, jars of rich liver pâté, and bottles of concentrated liquid. Vitamins hidden inside my coat pockets. I took a jar of pâté and a sleeve of crackers, hiding them under my robe, and hurried back to the bedroom, locking the door silently behind me. I woke Beatrice gently, touching her shoulder. She opened her eyes instantly, alert. She knew the drill. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the jar. The smell of the rich meat paste filled the space between us. A secret feast in the dark. I spread the pâté thick on the crackers and fed them to her one by one. She ate ravenously, her eyes locked on mine in the darkness. There were no words needed in those moments. We were not victims, we were conspirators. "Eat, my love," I whispered, wiping a crumb from her lip. "You need your strength, we are almost there." I gave her the vitamins, washing them down with fresh water. I had bottled from the bathroom tap earlier. She squeezed my hand, her grip getting stronger every night. The gray pallor was leaving her face, replaced by a color that came from nutrition and the thrill of our secret rebellion. After she ate, I ate the rest, washing the jar out in the bathroom sink and drying it completely before crushing the plastic cracker sleeve into a tiny ball that I hid inside the lining of my suitcase. Nothing for them to find, no evidence of our survival. Lying back in bed, holding Beatrice as the sun began to threaten the horizon, I listened to the house settle. I felt a cold, hard knot of hatred in my chest that had nothing to do with fatherhood anymore. Watching Tyler eat that steak while his mother starved had severed the last thread of attachment I had to him. He was not my son anymore. He was a parasite, a creature that fed on the host until there was nothing left. He thought he was starving us into submission, but he was only feeding my resolve. I closed my eyes, visualizing the trap springing shut, visualizing the look on his face when the floor dropped out from under him. I did not need sleep. I needed justice, and as the third day of hunger dawned, I knew the time for waiting was over. Today was the day I would bait the hook. The atmosphere in the living room was radioactive. Tyler was pacing a groove into the carpet, his phone clutching in his hand like a grenade that was about to go off. Every time it vibrated, and it was vibrating constantly, he would flinch, his eyes darting around the room with the frantic energy of a trapped animal. I knew who was calling it. Was the shark, the men who promised to break his legs if he did not come up with the money. By Friday, he was running out of options. He had tried to sell the house fast, but the title search was taking too long. He had tried to pawn Beatrice's jewelry, but he could not find the key to her vanity box because I had swallowed it 3 days ago. He was cornered, and a cornered rat is dangerous but also predictable. I sat in my armchair, wrapped in a blanket, watching him with the vacant expression I had perfected over the last week. Vanessa was sitting on the sofa, filing her nails with a rhythmic rasping sound that seemed to grate on Tyler's nerves. She looked bored, but I noticed she was watching him too, calculating her exit strategy. If the money did not materialize, she would be gone before the first blow landed. It was time to drop the bait. I cleared my throat, a dry, dusty sound that made Tyler stop pacing and glare at me. "What is it, Dad?" He snapped, his voice tight with stress. "Do you need to go to the bathroom again? Because I do not have time for this right now." "Son," I said, my voice raspy and slow. "I was just thinking about what you said about the house needing repairs, the roof and the plumbing. I know it is expensive." Tyler rolled his eyes, running a hand through his greasy hair. "Yeah, Dad, it is expensive money. We do not have because you are hoarding it in equity that we cannot access unless you sign the power of attorney. I nodded slowly, looking down at my hands, picking at a loose thread on the blanket. I know, I whispered. But I remembered something last night. I woke up and I remembered the safety deposit box. The room went silent. The rasping of the nail file stopped instantly. Tyler slowly turned to face me, his expression changing from annoyance to wariness. What safety deposit box? Dad, he asked, his voice dropping an octave. The one at the old First National branch downtown, I said, looking up at him with wide, innocent eyes. Your mother and I, we put money away for a rainy day years ago, cash mostly from when I did those extra shifts at the warehouse, and the bonus from the merger in '98. I never trusted the banks with all of it. You know how they are? Vanessa slowly lowered her nail file, her eyes narrowing like a cat spotting a mouse. Cash, she asked, leaning forward. How much cash, Conrad? I frowned, pretending to think hard, doing mental math in the air with a shaking finger. Well, we put in 5,000 here, 10,000 there over 20 years, I said innocently. Last time I checked about 5 years ago, it was around $500,000, give or take a few grand. The sound of Tyler's phone hitting the floor echoed in the silence. He had dropped it, his mouth hung open, and he stared at me as if I had just grown a second head. $500,000, it was the magic number. It was enough to pay off the shark cover, the interest, pay off his credit cards, and still have enough left over for a year of partying. It was his salvation. 500,000. Tyler choked out, stepping closer, almost tripping over his own feet. Cash, physical cash in a box. Yes, I said, blinking confusedly. I was saving it for a medical emergency, or maybe to fix the foundation. But since you say the house needs so much work, maybe we should go get it. The transformation was instantaneous and sickening. It was like watching a demon put on a human skin suit. In real time, the tension drained from Tyler. Face replaced by a look of sheer euphoric greed, he rushed over to me, dropping to his knees beside my chair, grabbing my hand with both of his. Dad. Oh my God, Dad, why did you not tell us this sooner? His voice was trembling, not with fear anymore, but with excitement. $500,000, that changes everything. We can fix the house, we can get Mom the best care, we can do everything. Vanessa was suddenly on my other side, her hand on my shoulder, massaging the tension. I did not have, Conrad, she cooed, her voice dripping with that fake honey again. You are amazing. You are such a provider, always thinking ahead. 500,000, that is a lot of money to just have sitting there. Is it safe? It is in the vault, I said, playing the part of the proud protector. I have the key hidden somewhere safe. I just need to remember where I put it. My memory is so foggy these days. Tyler gripped my hand tighter, his eyes intense, focused. Dad, you have to remember, this is important. We need that money to help Mom, to save the house, think. Dad, where's the key? I furrowed my brow, looking distressed. I think it is in my old tool chest in the garage, or maybe in the attic inside the old winter boots. I need to look, but I am so weak lately, I do not think I can climb the stairs. We will help you, Vanessa said quickly, standing up and practically radiating energy. We will turn this house upside down. We will find it. Do not you worry about a thing. Tyler looked at her, and they shared a look that communicated 1,000 words they did not care about. The repairs they did not care about, Beatrice. They were already spending the money in their heads. They were already planning the trip to Vegas, the new car, the freedom. Dad, Tyler said, standing up and brushing off his knees, listen to me. We are going to get you some food, real food, not that toast crap. You need your strength. If we are going to go to the bank tomorrow, we need you walking and talking. Okay? Suddenly the starvation policy was rescinded just like that, because a dead man cannot sign for a safety deposit box, and a weak man cannot walk into a vault. They needed me functional at least for 24 more hours. Vanessa run to the store. Tyler commanded, his voice filled with a new authority. Get steaks, get wine, get whatever Dad wants. Dad, what do you want to eat? I looked at him, suppressing the urge to vomit in his face. I think I would like a roast chicken, I said softly, and maybe some of that chocolate ice cream your mother likes. Done, Tyler said, pulling out his wallet, which I knew was empty, but he would find a way, probably by pawning something else while Vanessa was gone. Done and done, Dad. You are a genius, saving all that cash. You are a lifesaver. He hugged me and I felt his heart racing against my chest. It was the heartbeat of a junkie who just found a bag of heroin. He pulled away, smiling, and I smiled back. I am just glad I can help, son, I whispered. You have no idea, Dad, Tyler said, laughing, a manic edge to the sound. No idea. He walked into the kitchen, pulling out his phone, probably to text the shark that the money was coming to buy himself more time. I sat there watching them scramble, watching them celebrate their imaginary fortune. They took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. They were so blinded by the promise of easy money that they did not stop to ask why a man they thought was senile and broke suddenly remembered a $500,000 fortune. They did not know that the only thing in that safety deposit box was a single envelope containing a Xerox copy of a document that would send them both to prison for a very long time. But for now, let them eat steak, let them drink wine, let them think they won, because the higher they climbed, the harder they would fall. And I was going to be the one to push them. I spent 40 years in the logistics industry, managing warehouses the size of small cities, and if there is one thing that career teaches you, it is that theft always happens from the inside. The most dangerous threat is never the stranger breaking through the fence. It is the employee with the security clearance and a smile on his face to catch them. You do not need force, you need eyes in the dark while. Tyler was in the shower washing off the sweat of his desperation, and Vanessa was at the store buying the expensive roast chicken I had requested. I went into operation mode. I reached into the lining of my winter coat, where I had stashed the small blister pack I received from Blackwood. Earlier that day, they looked like replacement buttons for a dress shirt, but they were high-definition pinhole cameras with audio transmission. My hands, which I had forced to tremble in front of my son for days, were now steady as a surgeon's. I placed the first one in the kitchen, nestled discreetly amongst the dried flower arrangement on top of the refrigerator. It had a perfect view of the table and the stove. I placed the second one in the living room, tucked inside the vent of the air conditioning unit. I retreated to the master bedroom, locking the door with the wedge I had fashioned from a piece of scrap wood. I pulled out my burner phone and synced it to the feed. The image was crystal clear, grainy in the young. Low light, but sharp enough to see the pores on a face, sharp enough to see the soul of a traitor. Vanessa returned 20 minutes later, humming a tune, bags of groceries in her arms. She looked like the picture of domestic bliss, but on my small screen I saw the truth as she unpacked the chicken, slapping it onto the counter with a wet thud. Tyler walked into the kitchen, toweling dry. His hair. Did you get it? He asked, his voice low, checking the hallway to make sure I was not lurking. Vanessa stopped humming. She reached into the bottom of the grocery bag beneath the vegetables and the wine and pulled out a small orange prescription bottle. She rattled it next to her ear. A maraca of death Xanax, she whispered, and not the weak stuff my mom had a refill left over. These are 2 milligrams each, enough to knock out a horse or a 70-year-old man, I watched on the screen, my breath catching in my throat, as she set the bottle on the counter next to the spice rack. Tyler picked it up, staring at the label. Are you sure, Ness? He asked. He sounded nervous, but not because he was worried about my health. He was worried about the plan. Will it kill him? Not if we are careful, Vanessa said, grabbing a knife and a cutting board. She took 2 of the pills and began to crush them into a fine white powder. The sound of the metal crushing the medicine echoed through the microphone, tinny and harsh. We just need him pliable, Tyler. We need him confused enough to forget where the key is, but awake enough to sign the transfer documents, or at least awake enough to hold a pen. Tyler leaned against the counter, watching the powder, watching the weapon being forged. Dad is stubborn, he said. Even if he is high, he might refuse to sign until he sees the cash. That is why we do not let him refuse, Vanessa said, scraping the powder into a small pile. She looked up at him, and her face on the screen was a mask of cold calculation. If he passes out before he signs, we use his thumb. Tyler frowned his thumb for the biometric. Access on his banking app, you idiot, Vanessa hissed. And for the fingerprint signature on the deed, many notary apps accept biometric verification. Now if he is out cold, we just grab his hand, press it to the screen, and boom, the house is ours. The savings are ours. And once the transfer clears, well, accidents happen when old men mix heavy sedatives with heart medication. I sat on the edge of the bed, my blood running cold. They were not just planning to rob me, they were planning a seamless transition from theft to involuntary manslaughter. They were going to drug me, strip me of my assets, using my own unconscious body, and then let nature or a chemically induced heart attack take its course. But what about Mom? Tyler asked, looking toward the hallway. I leaned closer to the screen, needing to hear this, needing to hear my son's verdict on the woman who gave him life. Vanessa shrugged, wiping the knife clean on a dish towel. Beatrice is a vegetable. Tyler, without Conrad, she is just a drain on resources. Once the house is sold and the money is secure, we cannot be burdened with her nursing home fees, eating into our profit. So what do we do? Tyler asked, and I prayed to a God I had not spoken to in years, that he would say something human, that he would defend her. Vanessa turned on the faucet, filling the kettle for tea, creating a background noise of rushing water. But the microphone picked up her voice clearly. We wait until Conrad is gone, she said casually, as if discussing the weather. Once he is out of the picture, chaos ensues. The grieving widow stops eating. Maybe her oxygen tube gets pinched while she is sleeping. Maybe she just fades away from a broken heart. It happens all the time. Grief is a killer, Tyler. And honestly, it would be a mercy she is suffering. Tyler stood there silent for a long moment. He looked at the powder on the cutting board, then at the bedroom door where his mother lay, helpless. Yeah, he said finally, his voice devoid of emotion. A mercy. It would be better for everyone, especially us. We can be in Cabo by next month if this works. That was it, the final nail, the last shred of doubt incinerated in the fire of his greed. He had just agreed to euthanize his mother for a vacation in Mexico. I looked at Beatrice sleeping in the bed beside me, her chest rising and falling in a rhythm. I had known for 40 years they talked about her like she was a broken appliance to be discarded. They talked about me like I was a vault to be cracked. I saved the video file, uploading it to the cloud server. Ms. Montgomery had set up, this was not just evidence of theft anymore. This was conspiracy to commit murder. This was the end of their lives, and they did not even know it. On the screen, Vanessa was now mixing the white powder into a small bowl of sugar. She stirred it thoroughly, blending the poison with the sweetness. She put the bowl on the tray next to the teapot and 2 mugs. Showtime, she said, smiling at Tyler. Go get him. Tell him we are having a family tea before dinner. We want to hear stories about the old days. Make him feel special. Tyler nodded, running a hand through his hair, putting on his mask of the dutiful son. Okay. Let us get this over with. I want that money in my account by morning. I watched them on the screen, 2 predators preparing to ambush their prey. I turned off the phone and slipped it into my pocket. I stood up and looked in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes were tired, but my jaw was set. I was not going to drink that tea, but I was going to play the scene. I was going to let them think they had won. I was going to let them walk me to the edge of the cliff, because only at the edge could I push them off. There was a knock at the door, soft and rhythmic. Dad Tyler's voice came through the wood, warm and inviting. Come on out. We made tea. We want to celebrate finding the money. I opened the door and smiled at my executioner. I am coming, son, I said. I am coming. The living room was staged for a funeral, though my son and his girlfriend thought it was a celebration. The coffee table was cleared of the usual clutter, replaced by a silver tray holding a ceramic teapot, 3 mugs and a bowl of sugar that I knew contained enough crushed Xanax to stop the heart of a rhinoceros. The air conditioning was humming a low, monotonous drone that masked the sound of my own shallow breathing as I sat in my armchair, waiting for the curtain to rise on the final act of their betrayal. Vanessa walked in from the kitchen, carrying the tray, with a reverence that was almost comical. She placed it on the table, her hands steady, her smile fixed in place like a porcelain mask. "Here we go, Conrad," she said, pouring the steaming liquid into the mugs, a special blend of chamomile and peppermint to help you relax before our big day tomorrow. I watched the dark liquid fill the mug destined for me. I had seen her prepare it on the hidden camera feed just 10 minutes ago. I had watched her dump the entire contents of the white powder into that specific mug, stirring it until it dissolved completely into a lethal cocktail. She placed it directly in front of me, the handle turned toward my right hand, an invitation to my own execution. Tyler sat on the sofa opposite me, his knee bouncing again, a nervous tic he had never outgrown. He looked at the mug, then at me, his eyes wide and unblinking. "Drink up, Dad," he said, his voice tight. "It will help you sleep. You need a good night. As rest if we are going to the bank in the morning." I reached out my hand, trembling deliberately, and picked up the mug. The heat radiated through the ceramic, warming my cold fingers. I brought it to my lips, smelling the mint, but underneath it, I could smell the chalky chemical bitterness of the sedative. I did not drink it. I pretended to sip, letting the liquid touch my lips, but keeping my teeth clenched tight, I swallowed air, making a gulping sound in my throat. Then I lowered the mug, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. "It is hot," I murmured, setting it down. "It is good, though. It is very soothing." "Drink it all, Conrad." Vanessa urged, her eyes locked on the mug. "Do not let it get cold. The medicine. I mean, the herbs work better when it is hot." I picked it up again, engaging in a dangerous game of sleight of hand. I brought the mug to my mouth, tilting my head back, feigning a long, deep swallow. But in reality, I was letting the liquid flow into the thick, absorbent handkerchief I had concealed in my palm, covering my mouth, as if to wipe away a drip. I did this 3 times until the mug was empty, save for the dregs at the bottom. I set the empty mug back on the tray and let out a long, exaggerated sigh. "There," I said, smiling weakly, "all gone." Tyler let out a breath he had been holding, his shoulders dropping an inch. "Good, Dad." "That is good. Now we just wait for it to kick in." We sat in silence for 10 minutes. The longest. 10 minutes of my life. I watched the clock on the mantelpiece ticking away the seconds of their freedom. I watched Beatrice sleeping in the bedroom door slightly ajar, witnessing the scene without knowing the stakes. It started with a heaviness in my eyelids. I let my head loll to the side, my eyes fluttering closed, then snapping open as if fighting the drowsiness. "I feel so tired," I slurred, letting my words run together. "My arms feel heavy." "It is just the tea, Dad," Tyler said, leaning forward, his voice eager. "Just relax, let it happen." I let my head drop to my chest, my breathing deepening into a rhythmic snore. But my mind was razor-sharp, analyzing every sound, every movement. "Is he out?" Vanessa whispered, her voice cutting through the silence. Tyler stood up. I heard his footsteps approaching. He grabbed my shoulder and shook me hard, not gently, not like a son waking a father, but like a cop checking a drunk. "Dad," he shouted right in my ear. "Dad, wake up." I remained limp, letting my body be a dead weight. I did not react. I did not flinch. "He is out," Tyler said, and I heard the triumph in his voice. "He is out cold. Ness, grab the papers." I heard the rustling of documents being spread out on the table. Then the sound of Vanessa rummaging through my pockets. She was rough, her hands digging into my coat, searching for the key to the safety deposit box. "Here it is," she hissed, pulling out the old brass key I had planted earlier. "Found it. Okay, now the phone. Get his phone," Tyler ordered. I felt him reach into my pants pocket and pull out my smartphone. He grabbed my right hand, his fingers cold and clammy, and pressed my thumb roughly against the screen. Got it. We are in, Tyler said, accessing my banking app. Okay, transfer initiated 5,000, here 10,000. There, keep it under the reporting limit. Transfer the rest to the offshore shell. He was draining my accounts right in front of my unconscious body, stealing the money I had saved for his inheritance. But that was just the appetizer. The main course was the house. Okay, now the deed, Tyler said, his voice shaking with adrenaline. Bring the ink pad, I felt. Vanessa grabbed my hand again. She pressed my thumb onto a cold, wet ink pad. Then she moved my hand to the paper, pressing it down hard, rolling it side to side to get a clear print. Done, she said, wiping the ink from my thumb with a tissue. One thumbprint signature witnessed and notarized by your friend Dave in the morning. And the house belongs to the trust controlled by them, effectively stealing my home out from under me. They stood over me, panting slightly. The deed done, the theft complete, but then the script changed. He is breathing really shallow. Tyler observed, his voice tinged with a new darkness. Maybe the dose was too high. Ness, Vanessa laughed, a cold sound that had no humor in it. Who cares, Tyler, if he stops breathing? It just solves our problems faster. Tyler was silent for a moment, and I waited for him to object, to say something to defend the man who raised him. You are right, he said finally. If he goes tonight, we call it a heart attack in the morning. He was old, he was tired. Nobody will ask questions. And the mom. Vanessa asked what? About the vegetable. Tyler walked over to the bedroom door. I heard it creak open. I could feel him looking at Beatrice, looking at his mother. We wait until the coroner takes Dad, Tyler said softly, then we deal with her. Maybe she gets confused in her grief. Maybe she forgets to take her pills, or takes too many accidents happen in mourning. I lay there paralyzed by my own performance, listening to my son plan the murder of his mother. My heart was pounding so hard against my ribs, I was terrified they would see it beating through my shirt. They walked back to the kitchen, and I heard the pop of a cork champagne they were celebrating. They were drinking to my death, and my wife's demise standing over my body like vultures. I waited until I heard the clinking of glasses, until their laughter grew loud and careless. Then I let out a groan, a long guttural sound of distress. Tyler stopped laughing. What was that? I groaned again, clutching my chest, my eyes flying open wide and terrified, acting out the final throes of a heart attack. Help, I gasped, reaching out a hand toward them. My chest. It hurts. Tyler dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor, champagne foaming over the tiles. He stared at me, his face pale. He is waking up, Vanessa shrieked. Do something. I fell out of the chair, crashing onto the floor, my body seizing up, shaking violently. Call 911, I choked out. Please, son, help me. Tyler looked at me, then at the phone in his hand. He looked at the deed on the table with my fresh thumbprint still drying. He took a step back. No, he whispered. Tyler, call the ambulance, I begged, gasping for air. He looked at Vanessa. She shook her head slowly, her eyes hard as flint. Let him go, she mouthed. Tyler looked back at me, and in his eyes I saw the final death of the boy. I knew he put the phone in his pocket. He turned his back on me. I cannot, Dad, he said. His voice flat. I cannot help you. He walked into the kitchen and poured himself another glass of champagne, leaving me to die on the floor of the home I built for him. I let my body go still, my eyes staring blankly at the ceiling, capturing the image of the water stain on the plaster. A permanent record of the moment. My son became a murderer in his heart. I lay there listening to them toast in the other room, waiting for the silence, waiting for the morning, waiting for the moment. I would rise from the dead and bring hell with me. The floor was hard and cold against my cheek, the carpet fibers smelling of dust and the faint chemical scent of the cleaning spray Tyler used earlier to stage his act of being a dutiful son. I lay completely motionless, controlling my breathing through sheer force of will, taking in air in microscopic sips, holding it deep in my lungs, and letting it out slowly, silently, so my chest would not rise. I was a dead man to them, a discarded husk that had served its purpose and was now just litter on the floor of their future mansion. I heard them coming back from the kitchen, the heavy tread of my son and the sharp clicking of Vanessa's heels. They were not walking with the somber weight of grief. They were practically skipping, unsing, with an adrenaline-fueled energy that made my skin crawl. Pop, the sound of the champagne cork flying across the room was like a gunshot in the quiet house, followed by the fizzy rush of the wine overflowing onto the floor. Oops, Vanessa giggled, a sound that was high and shrill and devoid of humanity. Oh well, the cleaning crew can handle it tomorrow. Or better yet, we can just rip these carpets out. I always hated this color anyway, to us, Tyler said, and I heard the clink of glass above my head. To freedom, babe, and to the old man for finally doing the right thing and checking out early. They clinked glasses right over my body. A drop of cold champagne landed on my neck, sliding down my collar like a tear. I did not flinch. I did not wipe it away. I let it burn my skin, a baptism of their cruelty. Tyler nudged my leg with the toe of his shoe, not hard, but with a casual disrespect, like checking if a roadkill was truly dead. He is really gone, Ness, he said, sounding almost amazed. I mean, look at him. He looks like a wax figure. Good riddance, Vanessa spat, taking a loud gulp of her drink. Now stop staring at the carcass and let us find the real prize, you said. He kept a backup file in the wall safe in the study. Right, yeah, Tyler said, moving away from me, his voice echoing as he walked toward the hallway. Dad was paranoid about fires. He kept copies of everything in the fireproof safe, deed titles, and the will. The will that was the bait within the bait. I had spent an hour 2 nights ago forging a document on my old typewriter using paper. I had aged with tea stains to make it look official. I had placed it right on top of the stack inside the wall safe, knowing that the moment I was dead, this would be the first place they looked. I listened to the beep, beep, beep of the digital keypad. Tyler knew the code because I had told him it was his birthday, years ago, a sentimental gesture that he was now using to rob my grave. Click, the sound of the safe opening was loud in the silence, followed by the rustling of papers. Here it is. Tyler shouted, his voice cracking with excitement. Oh my God! Ness, look at this. Look at the date. It is from 5 years ago. Read it. Vanessa urged, her voice coming closer as she ran toward the study. I lay on the floor, visualizing them huddled over that piece of paper, their greedy eyes scanning the lines I had written with such calculated malice. I, Conrad Sterling, being of sound mind and body, hereby bequeath my entire estate, including all real property, liquid assets and investments, to my beloved son, Tyler Sterling, to be the sole executor and beneficiary. Tyler let out a whoop of joy that shook the wall's sole beneficiary. Ness, did you hear that? Sole beneficiary? That means everything. The house, the accounts, the secret stash he talked about. It is all mine, no probate, no fighting with charity. It is ours. We are rich, Vanessa screamed, and I heard the sound of paper being crumpled in a hug. We are filthy rich. Tyler. We can pay off the shark. We can buy the penthouse in Miami. We never have to work a day in our lives again. They laughed, a manic, hysterical sound that filled the house, bouncing off the ceiling and crashing down on me. It was the laughter of people who had sold their souls and thought they got a bargain. Wait, Tyler said, his laughter subsiding into a dark chuckle. It says here he leaves a small stipend for the care of his wife, Beatrice, strictly for basic maintenance. Vanessa scoffed. Basic maintenance? What does that mean? Like cat food? It means we are in charge of her care, Tyler said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. And since I am the sole executor, I get to decide what basic means, and if her condition were to suddenly deteriorate due to grief, well, the estate would save a lot of money on monthly bills. They walked back into the living room, standing over me again, looking down at the father who had just made them rich. You know, Tyler mused, swirling the ice in his glass. He was not a bad guy, really, just old, and in the way he had a good run, 70 years is plenty. He was stingy, Vanessa corrected him, kicking my shoe. He sat on millions while we struggled. He deserved to go out like this, tricked by his own tea. Yeah, well, he gave us the last laugh, Tyler said. He raised his glass again to Dad. Thanks for the money. Old man, say hello to the devil for me. They finished their drinks and walked toward the bedroom where my wife lay helpless and terrified. I heard Tyler Est's voice smooth and cold through the open door. Don't worry, Mom, he called out, mocking her. Dad just went to sleep, and soon you will be sleeping too. We are going to take such good care of you until the funeral. They laughed again, slamming the bedroom door shut, leaving Beatrice in the dark with her terror, and me on the floor with my rage. But they had forgotten one thing in their arrogance. They had forgotten to check the room for eyes. They had forgotten that I was a man who built a logistics empire on surveillance and control. Every word they said, every laugh, every toast to my death, every threat against my wife was being recorded by the high-fidelity microphones hidden in the air vents. The audio file was being uploaded in real time to a secure server, accessible only by me and Miss Montgomery, they thought. They were standing over a corpse, but they were standing over a landmine, and the timer was ticking down to 0. I waited until the house went quiet, until they went to the guest room to pass out from the champagne and the adrenaline. I waited until the only sound was the wind howling outside and the steady rhythm of my own heart beating with a cold, furious purpose. Then slowly, painfully, I opened my eyes. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the shadows, and I made a promise to the darkness. Tomorrow I would not just wake up tomorrow, I would rise like a judgment, and I would bring the whole world crashing down on their heads. The party was over. It was time for the hangover to begin. 2 days after they left me for dead. On the living room floor, my house had been transformed into a stage for the most macabre theater production in the history of the suburbs. Tyler had rallied remarkably when he found me breathing the next morning. Instead of panicking, he saw an opportunity. He spun a story about a minor stroke, claiming it had left me confused and pliable, and now, 48 hours later, he was throwing me a surprise 75th birthday party. Even though my birthday was in November. The living room was packed, not just with his degenerate friends who were drinking my scotch like water, but with people who mattered far more to my son. Business associates of the loan shark men, in cheap suits with bulges under their jackets that were definitely not wallets. And right there in the corner, leaning against the wall with the casual menace of a tiger. Waiting for a meal was the shark himself. I sat in a rented wheelchair next to Beatrice, my head lolling to one side. A line of drool carefully engineered for effect, running down my chin. Tyler had dressed me in my best suit, but he had buttoned the vest wrong on purpose to make me look incompetent and disheveled. Beatrice was beside me in her own chair, clutching a stuffed animal they had shoved into her hands to make her look childish and senile. We were not guests, we were props. We were the dying king and queen wheeled out to legitimize the coronation of the usurper. Tyler was working the room, holding a glass of scotch, playing the part of the grieving, yet strong son bearing the burden of his parents. Decline, look at them, he would whisper to guests, shaking his head sadly. It happened so fast, the dementia took them both. But I promised I would take care of everything. I am stepping up, it is what a son does. Vanessa was circulating with a tray of appetizers, playing the saintly daughter-in-law, wiping imaginary drool from my face whenever someone was looking, putting on a show, of tenderness that made my stomach turn. She leaned in close to me, smiling for the crowd while whispering in my ear. Don't you dare move, old man, she hissed through her teeth. Just sit there and look pathetic, or we stop the pain meds for Beatrice permanently. I blinked slowly, giving her a vacant stare, while inside my mind was a steel trap recording every face, every threat, every lie. I saw the shark walk over to Tyler. They exchanged a nod, a silent communication that said, "The deal is on." The shark walked over to us. He did not look at me with pity. He looked at me like a butcher looks at a side of beef, checking the grade. He leaned down his cologne, smelling of musk and gunpowder. "Cute party, old man," he whispered. "So only I could hear your son. Says you are signing the papers tonight. You better sign or this party turns into a funeral. Real fast." I let my head drop to my chest, feigning sleep, but my heart was hammering a war drum against my ribs. They thought I was trapped. They thought the guests were here to celebrate. They did not know that half the catering staff were actually undercover agents coordinated by Miss Montgomery, and that the man tending bar was Detective Blackwood himself. Tyler tapped a spoon against his glass, the sharp ting-ting-ting silencing the room. The music died down and the spotlight fell on us. "Ladies and gentlemen," Tyler announced, his voice booming with false emotion, raising his glass high. "Thank you all for coming tonight. Is not just a birthday celebration. It is a transition." My father, in his lucid moments, expressed a wish to secure the family legacy tonight. In front of all of you, his witnesses, he is going to sign the transfer of the estate to ensure his and Mom's care is funded forever. The crowd applauded, a polite ripple of clapping, led by the Shark S goons. A man I recognized from the Investigator S file as Paul Hayes, the forger, stepped forward, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, holding a leather binder, looking like a lawyer from a television commercial. "It is time," Dad Tyler said, walking over to me with a heavy, expensive fountain pen. He knelt down so our faces were level, blocking the view of the crowd. "Sign it," he whispered, his eyes hard and cold. "Sign it, and we let you live another week. Refuse, and Mom dies tonight." He placed the binder on my lap and put the pen in my trembling hand. I looked at the paper, blurring my vision. Intentionally, it was the deed, the irrevocable transfer of everything I owned. I gripped the pen, my hand shaking violently, not from weakness, but from the effort of holding back the explosion for just one more minute. I looked up at the room, at the sea of faces waiting for the old man to give up his throne. I looked at the shark, who was smirking. I looked at Vanessa, who was already mentally decorating my house. And then I looked at the big screen television mounted on the wall behind Tyler, intended to show a montage of family photos. It was time to change the channel. Tyler stood in the center of the room, the microphone gripped in his hand like a scepter, his other hand resting theatrically over his heart. He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the anticipation build. He was a natural performer, a con artist in his element, and this was his magnum opus. He looked out at the sea of faces, at the sharks, thugs pretending to be business partners, at his drinking buddies pretending to be concerned. Friends, and he let a single perfect tear roll down his cheek. "It has not been easy," he began, his voice trembling with a practiced vulnerability that made my stomach churn. "You all know me, you know. I had big dreams. I had a career in Detroit that was taking off. I had a life, but when family calls, you answer. When I got the call that Dad was sick, that Mom was deteriorating, I did not hesitate. I dropped everything. I came home because that is what you do for the people who raised you." I sat there, my head bowed, listening to him rewrite history. He had not dropped a career. He had been fired for embezzlement. He had not come home to help. He had come home because he was homeless and running from debt collectors. But the crowd nodded, murmuring their approval, buying the lie because it was wrapped in a tuxedo and served with expensive champagne. He walked over to where I sat, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder, squeezing it tight enough to bruise a silent reminder of who was in charge. Watching my father fade. Tyler continued, his voice thick with emotion, watching the strongest man I know lose his battle with his own mind. "It has been the hardest thing I have ever had to do. There were nights I did not think I could go on. The medical bills were piling up. The care was constant, 24/7, but I looked at him, and I knew I had to be strong for both of them." He looked down at me with a gaze that simulated love but felt like hatred. And yesterday, in a moment of clarity, Dad took my hand and he said, "Tyler, I am tired. I want to rest. I want you to take the wheel." He told me he wanted to secure the legacy he built. He wanted to make sure Mom was taken care of, no matter what happened to him. So he asked me to prepare these documents to transfer the estate into a trust under my management, so he could finally let go of the burden. The room erupted in polite applause. Again orchestrated by Vanessa, who was dabbing her dry eyes with a handkerchief. "So, tonight," Tyler said, his voice rising triumphantly. "Tonight, we honor that wish. Tonight, we witness the passing of the torch. Right here, right now. My father will sign the papers that ensure his peace and our future." He gestured to the side of the room where Paul Hayes, the forger, was standing by a small table set up with an official-looking embosser and a notary stamp. Hayes adjusted his glasses, looking every inch the distinguished attorney. He nodded solemnly, opening the stamp pad with a click that sounded like a gun cocking in the silence. I shifted my gaze to the back corner of the room, to the shadows where the shark was standing. He was not clapping. He was watching Tyler with eyes like black holes. He took a sip of his drink and gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. It was the sign the deal was accepted. The collateral was approved. As long as the ink hit the paper, he would get his money and Tyler would keep his kneecaps. Tyler turned back to me, the microphone now hanging loosely at his side. The performance was over now, came the execution. He leaned down, the smell of expensive scotch on his breath, masking the rot inside. "Do it," he whispered, his lips barely moving. "Sign the paper, Dad. Make everyone happy." He held the document flat against the binder, smoothing it out with his hand, eager to see his victory finalized. The paper was heavy, cream-colored, expensive stock. For a cheap crime. I looked at the signature line waiting for me. I looked at the fake lawyer ready to stamp my life away. I looked at the shark counting his money in his head, and then I looked at my son, the boy who used to cry when he scraped his knee, now a man who would bury his parents for a payout. I tightened my grip on the pen, my fingers no longer trembling. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a cold, absolute clarity. "I hope you enjoyed the speech, son," I thought, "because it is the last time anyone is going to listen to you." I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the air of my own home, and I prepared to rewrite the ending. The pen felt cold in my hand, a cylinder of metal designed to sign away my legacy. Tyler was leaning over me, his breath hot on my face, his eyes manic with the proximity of his victory sign. "It," he hissed, "sign it, and die." Happy old man. I looked at the tip of the pen, hovering over the line, and then I looked at my hand. For the last week, I had forced it to tremble, to shake like a leaf in a storm. But now, in this moment of absolute truth, the trembling stopped. My hand became as steady as stone, as solid as the foundation of the warehouse I built 40 years ago. Tyler frowned, confusion flickering in his eyes. "Dad, what are you doing your hand?" I did not answer. Instead, I stood up. I did not struggle. I did not use the armrests for leverage. I stood up straight, my spine uncurling to my full height of 6'2", shedding the weight of the frail old man I had pretended to be. The years seemed to melt off my shoulders, replaced by the steel posture of a man who had stared down union strikes and hostile takeovers. I towered over my son, and the shock on his face was the first payment on his debt. I looked him dead in the eye and let the silence stretch until it was screaming. Then I flicked my wrist and sent the expensive fountain pen spinning across the room. It hit the wall with a sharp crack, leaving a splatter of ink like a bullet hole next to the fake lawyer's head. "I do not think I will be signing anything tonight." "Tyler," I said, my voice booming. Not the raspy whisper of a dying man, but the command voice of a CEO accustomed to silencing boardrooms with a single word. Tyler stumbled back, tripping over his own feet, knocking into the table, the notary stamp clattering to the floor. "Dad, what is happening?" "Sit down. You are confused. The medication?" "I am not confused. I interrupted, stepping forward, forcing him to retreat until he was backed against the stage. I have never been more lucid in my life. You wanted a show, son. You wanted a spectacle. Well, let me give you one. A murmur ran through the crowd. The shark in the corner straightened up, his hand moving instinctively toward his jacket, his predator instincts telling him the prey had just become the hunter. Vanessa dropped her tray of appetizers, the crash of breaking glass punctuating the shift in power. You told these people a story, Tyler, I said, scanning the room, locking eyes with the men who had come to collect my house. You told them I was sick. You told them I was weak. You told them I begged for your help. Let us see the director. S-cut. I reached into my vest pocket and pulled out. Not a handkerchief, but a small black remote control. I pointed it at the massive screen behind him, where a slideshow of stock photos of happy families was looping the light from the projector, casting a halo around my son, terrified face. You wanted to secure your legacy, I said, my thumb hovering over the red button. Let us see what you really built. I pressed the button. The screen went black for a heartbeat, a void in the room that sucked in all the air, and then it flickered to life with a high-definition video feed that was definitely not a family memory. The video feed on the massive screen was grainy, but the audio was crystal clear, amplified by the expensive sound system Tyler had rented to broadcast his victory, and the image resolved into a view of my kitchen, captured from the top of the refrigerator, looking down like the eye of an angry god. The room watched in stunned silence as the digital version of Vanessa appeared on screen, chopping lines of white powder on the cutting board. Her voice rang out sharp and venomous. If he passes out before he signs, we use his thumb, and if he stops breathing well, it just solves our problems faster. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. I saw the real Vanessa standing by the buffet table, her face draining of color, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. She looked at the screen, then at me, then at the guests, who were now looking at her, not with admiration, but with dawning horror. The video cut to a new scene, this one time-stamped just 3 days ago. It showed Tyler sitting at the dining table eating a steak, while his mother sat in her wheelchair, staring at a bowl of gray water. The camera zoomed in digitally, thanks to the high resolution capturing the smirk on his face as he swallowed a bite of meat. Beatrice is a vegetable, Tyler's voice boomed through the speakers, echoing off the walls of the house he was trying to steal. Without Conrad, she is just a drain. On resources, we wait until he is gone, and then maybe her oxygen tube gets pinched. Grief is a killer. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating, broken only by the sound of the video continuing to play, showing scene after scene of their cruelty, the laughter as they discussed selling my furniture, the mockery as they planned to send Beatrice to the state facility, the cold calculation of my murder. I watched the faces of Tyler's friends, the ones who had been drinking my liquor 10 minutes ago. They were backing away from him, their expressions twisting into disgust. Even the loan shark standing in the shadows looked sick. He was a criminal. He broke legs for a living. But in his world, mothers were sacred. Looking at Tyler with the kind of hatred usually reserved for rats and informants. Tyler stood frozen on the stage, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a hook. He tried to reach for the remote to stop the projection, but his hands were shaking too badly, and I had the control. I am not done, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. I pressed the button one last time, bringing up the final clip. It was Tyler talking on the phone, his voice desperate and pleading. Just give me 1 more week, he was saying on the recording. Once the old man is dead, I will kick the old woman to the curb. I will dump her at the shelter and sell the house immediately. You will get your money, double. Just let me finish them off. The video froze on Tyler's face, distorted and ugly with greed. I let the image burn into the retinas of everyone present. Then I turned off the screen, plunging the room back into the dim mood lighting, but the mood had changed from celebration to a lynching. I walked over to the microphone stand where Tyler had stood moments ago, giving his tearful speech. He shrank away from me, terrified, stumbling back until he hit the wall. "You stood here," I said. My voice amplified, filling every corner of the room. "You stood here and told these people you loved us. You told them you sacrificed for us. You told them you were a man." I looked out at the crowd, making eye contact with the fake lawyer, who was now frantically packing his bag, trying to disappear. I looked at the shark who had not moved, who was watching me with a newfound respect and a dangerous curiosity. "You all look at me and you see a retired warehouse manager." I continued, my voice steady and cold. "You see a pensioner living on Social Security. You see a victim." I reached into my inner pocket and pulled out a single piece of paper, not a will, not a deed, but a business card made of heavy black metal with gold lettering. I held it up, catching the light. "You didn't do your homework, son," I said, turning to Tyler, who was sliding down the wall, his legs giving out beneath him. "You thought I worked at the warehouse. You never asked who owned the warehouse. You never asked who owned the logistics fleet that moves cargo across 3 continents. You never asked because you were too busy waiting for me to die. I am not just Conrad the retiree. I am Conrad Sterling, founder and majority shareholder of Sterling Global Logistics." A ripple of shock went through the room. The name meant something. It meant power. It meant industry. It meant money that made the loan shark's operation look like a lemonade stand. And here's the punchline. "Tyler," I said, walking closer to him, towering over his cowering form, "that crypto exchange you used, the one where you leveraged yourself into oblivion, the one where you lost $200,000 betting on digital air." I paused, letting him look up at me, letting him see the truth in my eyes. "I acquired that platform 6 months ago, through a subsidiary holding company. I own the debt, Tyler. I am the bank." The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse. The shark in the corner let out a low whistle, stepping out of the shadows. His hands raised in a gesture of surrender, knowing instantly that the food chain had just been rearranged. "You owe the money to me," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that screamed louder than any shout. "You tried to kill me to pay a debt that you owed to my own company. You tried murder your mother to settle a ledger that I control." I turned to the crowd, to the guests, who were now witnesses to a Greek tragedy. "This party is over," I announced. "Get out of my house." But nobody moved, not yet, because the sound of sirens was rising in the distance, getting louder and louder, screaming toward the cul-de-sac, bringing the final act of justice to my doorstep. I looked at Vanessa, who was trying to sneak toward the back door, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood. "Don't bother running, Vanessa," I called out, without looking at her. "The police have the perimeter sealed, and Ms. Montgomery sent the FBI your file an hour ago." She froze, her face crumbling, as the reality of her life sentence crashed down on her. I turned back to my son, who was weeping on the floor. Not tears of remorse, but tears of a man who realizes he burned a winning lottery ticket because he was too impatient to cash it in. "You wanted an inheritance, son," I said, looking down at him with zero pity. "Well, here it is. You inherit the consequences." The sound of the front door splintering off its hinges for the second time that week was the only applause my son received that night. Blue and red lights washed over the living room walls, turning the faces of the terrified guests into grotesque masks of panic. A team of officers in tactical gear moved into the room with the precision of a scalpel, cutting through the confusion and the screaming. "Federal agents! Nobody move!" a voice boomed over the chaos. I stood on the stage watching the raid unfold, with the calm detachment of a man watching a demolition he had ordered hours ago. Ms. Montgomery had not just called the local precinct. She had leveraged the interstate nature of Vanessa S. fraud and the wire transfers to bring in the heavy artillery. 2 officers made a beeline for Vanessa, who was cowering behind the buffet table trying to blend in with the catering staff. She let out a shriek as they grabbed her arms, pulling her hands behind her back, the sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut. Click, click, click was the sweetest music I had heard in years. "Get off me!" she screamed, kicking and thrashing, her mask of sophistication dissolving into the feral desperation of a trapped animal. I did not do anything. It was all him. He made me do it. Tyler was still slumped against the wall beneath the screen that still displayed his distorted face. He did not fight. He did not run. He just stared at the officers as they hauled him up his legs, dragging uselessly beneath him. Tyler Sterling, the lead officer, announced, his voice cutting through Vanessa's wailing. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Conrad Sterling and the aggravated abuse of a dependent adult. We also have warrants for wire fraud, identity theft, and forgery." "Attempted murder," Tyler wheezed, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the snot running from his nose. "I never touched him. You did not have to," I said, stepping down from the stage, walking toward him, as the officers held him secure. "We have the tea, son. We have the cup with your fingerprints and the residue of the sedatives. You tried to force feed me. The lab boys are going to have a field day with that." Tyler looked at me, his eyes wide with the realization that I had saved the evidence, that I had walked into his trap just to spring my own. "And we have the video of you planning to suffocate your mother." I added, my voice low and hard. "That is conspiracy to commit capital murder in this state, son. They have the needle for that." As they dragged him toward the door, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Nobody wanted to be near him. Nobody wanted to be associated with the monster revealed on the screen. But one man did not look away. The shark stood by the window, his hands raised casually, showing he was unarmed. The police were ignoring him for the moment, focused on the primary targets. The shark locked eyes with Tyler as he was dragged past. He did not say a word. He did not have to. He just smiled, a slow, cold smile, and tapped his wrist as if checking a watch. Then he drew a finger across his throat, not a threat of immediate death, but a promise of a debt that would follow him behind bars. Tyler saw it, and he started to scream, a raw, terrified sound that had nothing to do with the police. "Please do not let them take me, Dad. Please, they will kill me in there. Dad, help me." I watched him struggle, his boots scraping against the hardwood floor, leaving black scuff marks on the house he tried to steal. I stood still, my hands clasped behind my back, watching my only child being carried out like the garbage he was. "I did help you, son," I whispered to the empty air. "I helped you find the only place where you cannot hurt anyone ever again." The officers pushed him out into the snow and the flashing lights, leaving me standing in the ruin of my living room, surrounded by strangers and silence. But for the first time in days, the air felt clean, the rot had been cut out, and the healing could finally begin. The strobe lights from the squad cars painted the room in violent flashes of red and blue, illuminating the wreckage of the party like a crime scene. Which I suppose it was. The music was gone, replaced by the crackle of police radios and the heavy thud of boots. Tyler was on his knees, not because he wanted to pray, but because the officers had forced him down, his hands cuffed tightly behind his back, his face pressed against the hardwood floor he had tried to steal. He twisted his neck, looking up at me with eyes that were red and streaming with tears, snot running down his upper lip. He looked pathetic, a child who had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar only. The jar was my life savings, and the cookie was his mother's life. "Dad," he choked out, his voice cracking. "Dad, please tell them to stop. This is a mistake. Tell them I am your son." I stood over him, my hands in my pockets, feeling the cold weight of the business card I had shown him moments before. I looked at this man, this stranger wearing my son's face, and I felt absolutely nothing. The rage was gone. The sorrow was gone. There was only a hollow silence where my love for him used to be. "I am your son," he screamed again, desperation making his voice shrill. "I made a mistake, okay. I admit it, I messed up. But you cannot let them take me to prison. I will not survive in there, Dad. Please, family, sticks together." I crouched down slowly, my knees protesting, but my face remaining impassive. I got close enough to smell the fear on him, close enough to see the dilated pupils of a man watching his life end. "Family sticks together." I repeated my voice, soft and deadly, like the calm before a tsunami. Is that what you told yourself when you watched your mother try to drink condensation off a window? Is that what you thought when you poured poison into my tea? I did not mean it, Tyler sobbed. I was desperate. I owed money. I would have paid you back, I swear. You would have paid me back with what I asked, with the life insurance money from my death, with the proceeds from selling my home. You cannot pay back a life, Tyler. You cannot refund a betrayal this deep. I stood up, dusting off my trousers as if I had just touched something filthy. My son died 3 days ago, I said, my voice projecting clearly over his sobs. He died the moment he decided a vacation in Cabo was worth more than his mother. His breath, the man on the floor right now. I do not know him. He is just a criminal who broke into my house and tried to kill my wife. No, Dad, no. Tyler wailed, struggling against the cuffs, the officers hauling him to his feet. Officer, take him away, I said, turning my back on him. I do not want this trash in my house anymore. Dad, I love you. Please do not do this, Tyler screamed as they dragged him out the door, his boots scraping across the floor one last time, leaving a final black mark on the wood. I did not turn around. I did not flinch. I walked to the window and watched the reflection in the glass as they shoved him into the back of the cruiser. I watched him thrash against the window, screaming my name, but the sound was muffled, distant, like a bad memory fading in the light of day. The shark watched from the corner, a silent observer to the execution. He tipped his imaginary hat to me and slipped out the back door, vanishing into the night, seeking new prey. But Tyler was going to a cage where the debts he owed would be collected in ways money could not cover. I watched the police cars drive away, their sirens wailing into the night, carrying the last of my biological legacy to a cell. I felt a hand on my arm. It was Beatrice, weak, but standing supported by her walker. She had come out of the bedroom, witnessing the end. Is he gone? She whispered. Yes, I said, wrapping my arm around her frail shoulders. He is gone. And for the first time in 3 days, I did not feel the need to pretend. I did not feel the need to be strong. I just felt peace, the terrible, heavy peace of a man who has cut off a gangrenous limb to save the body. We stood there in the ruin of our living room, survivors of a war no one else knew. We were fighting, and as the last red tail light disappeared around the corner, I turned away, dry-eyed and ready to rebuild. 6 months have passed since the sirens faded into the snowy night, and the house in Chicago is gone. I sold it a week after the trial, not for the money, but to burn the bridge. I did not want the walls that witnessed my wife as torture to stand anymore. I sold it to a young couple with a baby, hoping their happiness would exorcise the ghosts my son left behind. Now the only sound I hear is the rhythmic crashing of the Pacific Ocean against the rocks below our terrace in Malibu. The air here smells of salt and jasmine, not stale beer and betrayal. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet, a stark contrast to the gray cold of that winter. I look over at Beatrice. She is sitting in her new motorized chair, wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and a light linen dress. Her cheeks are no longer sunken and gray, they are rosy, filled with the color of life and good nutrition. She is laughing at a seagull trying to steal a cracker from our table. She is not a vegetable, she is not a burden. She is the love of my life, and she is blooming again. We have a private nurse now, a kind woman named Elena who treats Beatrice with dignity. Not because I pay her a fortune, but because she has a good heart. I watch them talk and I feel a lightness in my chest that I have not felt in years. People ask me if I feel guilty putting my own flesh and blood behind bars. They ask how a father can sleep at night, knowing his son is in a cage. I tell them, I sleep just fine. I sleep with the windows open, listening to the waves. I get letters sometimes from the penitentiary, thick envelopes scrawled with Tyler S. Desperate handwriting, begging for an appeal, begging for money, for the commissary, begging for forgiveness. I do not open them. I have a fire pit on the deck, and I watch them turn to ash one by one, sending the smoke out over the water. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I disagree. True revenge is not about inflicting pain. It is not about torture or shouting matches. It is about letting them exist in the vacuum of their own terrible choices. The sweetest revenge is not doing anything to them at all. It is letting them live the rest of their lives in that concrete box, gnawing on the knowledge of what they threw away. Every morning when Tyler wakes up on a thin mattress, staring at a gray ceiling, he has to live with the fact that he had a kingdom waiting for him. He had a father who would have given him the world if he had just been a decent man. He threw away a diamond to pick up a piece of broken glass because he was too greedy to wait. That regret, that constant gnawing realization that he did this to himself is a prison tighter than any bars could ever be. I take Beatrice's hand, and she squeezes mine back, her grip strong and warm. We are survivors, she and I, and as the sun dips below the horizon, realize that the best part of my wealth was never the money. It was the freedom to protect the only thing that truly mattered. We are free, and that is the only ending I ever needed. The greatest tragedy of my son wasn't his debt. It was his blindness. He looked at his parents and saw only expiration dates and dollar signs. He mistook my silence for senility and my kindness for weakness. But he learned too late that the foundation of a family isn't built on inheritance, it is built on respect. When you trade loyalty for greed, you don't just lose the money, you lose your humanity. True power doesn't come from taking what isn't yours, it comes from protecting what matters. In the end, we all get exactly the legacy we build. If you believe justice was served today, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of truth and retribution. Tell me in the comments, was I too harsh on my son, or was this the only way to save my family?